What if I told you that the mighty warriors of Sparta, those legendary hoplites who terrified the ancient world, were not the true source of Spartan power? What if behind the shield walls and bronze helmets, there lurked a secret brotherhood, an order so hidden that even most Spartans dared not speak their name? A group that operated in the shadows, enforcing obedience with blood and fear. This is the story of the Cryptii, the Dark Brotherhood of Sparta. The year is 431 BC, the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. To the outside world, Sparta is a land of warriors, disciplined, fearless, raised from birth to serve the state. But beneath that polished image lies a truth no foreigner is meant to see. Sparta's greatness was built on the backs of the Helots, a population of enslaved people who farmed the land, fed the soldiers, and sustained the system. For every Spartan warrior, there were as many as 7 Helots, restless and resentful. A single spark of rebellion could burn the entire Spartan state to the ground. The ruling elite knew this. They understood that if the Helots ever rose together, Sparta would fall. And so, they created something dark, something unspoken. The Cryptii. The Cryptii was unlike any army or police force. It was a hidden brotherhood of young Spartan men, chosen in silence, trained in cruelty, unleashed upon the Helots. Their mission was not battle, it was terror. Imagine this. When the sun went down over the fields of Laconia, the Cryptii came out. Barefoot, armed only with daggers, they stalked the countryside in the dead of night. They would wait in the shadows, watching the Helots as they returned from the fields. And then, without warning, they struck. There was no battlefield here, no honor, no shields clashing, just quick, silent death. The Cryptii killed not to fight an enemy, but to keep an entire population in fear. It was a ritual of control, a blood sacrifice demanded by the Spartan state. Every autumn, something chilling happened. The Spartan magistrates, the ephors, declared war, not on Athens, not on Persia, but on their own slaves. With this declaration, it became legal for the Cryptii to kill Helots without trial, without reason. It was state-sanctioned murder, a cycle of terror renewed each year, ensuring the Helots never forgot who ruled them. The Helots lived with this fear daily. At night, they would hear whispers in the fields, footsteps in the dark. They never knew if the young man they saw by the well, or the shadow near the olive groves, was a Cryptian sent to slit their throat. This was not war. This was psychological domination at its most brutal. But why would Sparta, the proudest military society of the ancient world, resort to something so dishonorable, so secretive? Was it weakness? Or was it genius? Some historians believe the Cryptii served another purpose. It was not just about terrorizing the Helots. It was a test for young Spartans, a rite of passage. To join the Brotherhood of Warriors, you had to prove yourself by killing in cold blood, by surviving alone in the countryside, without shelter or supplies, and returning only when your hands were stained with Helot blood. It was not enough to be brave in battle. You had to be ruthless. You had to be feared. Only then could you stand among Sparta's elite. And so, the Cryptii became more than just a brotherhood. It became a shadow institution, a secret layer of Spartan society. The men who passed through it carried scars no one could see. They had learned to kill without hesitation, without conscience. They had learned the true meaning of Spartan survival. But what did the Helots think? They were not a mindless mass. They had their own culture, their own families, their own traditions. To them, the Cryptii was a ghost story made real. The figures in the night who killed without warning, who left bodies in the fields as a message, submit or die. And yet, whispers of rebellion never died. Because no matter how many Helots the Cryptii killed, no matter how much fear they spread, the Helots still outnumbered their masters. They still dreamed of freedom, and when the time came, they would rise. The Cryptii was not just a brotherhood. It was a gamble. A dangerous game of terror and silence. A game that could not last forever. But here is the mystery. How much of this is true? Did the Cryptii truly stalk the Helots every night? Or was it exaggerated by outsiders who hated Sparta's cruel system? Some ancient writers, like Plutarch, describe the Cryptii in chilling detail. Others dismiss it as rumor. And yet, even if only part of it was true, it tells us something dark about Sparta. Behind the noble image of the hoplite, behind the shining bronze and discipline, there was fear. Fear that the mighty warriors could be destroyed not by Persians or Athenians, but by the very people they enslaved. Sparta's power was never just about courage or discipline. It was also about control, about keeping an entire nation silent, about a brotherhood of killers no one dared to name. But what happened when the Helots finally pushed back? What happened when the fear was no longer enough to keep them down? Because one day, the Helots would rise. And when they did, the Cryptii would face their greatest test. The Cryptii had ruled the knights of Sparta for generations. Their blades kept the Helots in check, their terror carved deep into the soil of Laconia. But shadows never last forever. Fear can control a people for a time, but sooner or later, fear turns into rage. And for the Helots, that moment came. The year was 464 BC. A violent earthquake shook the land of Sparta. Buildings collapsed. Temples crumbled. Thousands of Spartans died under the ruins. The proud city of warriors was suddenly weakened, exposed. The Helots saw their chance. They rose in rebellion. The Cryptii, trained to stalk and kill individuals, suddenly faced something far greater, an uprising of thousands. No daggers in the night this time. No silent murders. This was war. The Helots fortified themselves on the slopes of Mount Ithome, a natural fortress that overlooked the region. From there, they launched attacks, striking the weakened Spartans again and again. For the first time, the balance of fear shifted. Imagine the panic inside Sparta. The same men who once terrorized their slaves now found themselves outnumbered, besieged, and desperate. The ruling class of Spartans, the Spartiates, were shaken. The Cryptii could spread terror, but could it stop an army? The rebellion dragged on. The Helots fought fiercely, as if every man had been waiting his whole life for this moment. The land trembled not from earthquakes now, but from battle cries. Sparta, humiliated, did something it almost never did. It asked for help. The city called on its allies from the Peloponnesian League, even turning to its rivals in Athens. At first, Athens sent troops to help, an uneasy alliance between two bitter enemies. But soon, suspicion and mistrust grew. The Spartans, paranoid of Athenian influence, dismissed their allies and tried to crush the rebellion alone. The war with the Helots lasted nearly 10 years. 10 years of bloodshed, fear, and humiliation. A people who were supposed to be slaves had brought mighty Sparta to its knees. And what of the Cryptii during these years? Some say they were still unleashed, still creeping into Helot camps at night, killing leaders, spreading terror. But against a whole army, their methods seemed powerless. The Brotherhood's greatest weapon, fear, was no longer enough. The Helots had learned something crucial. If they stood together, the Cryptii could not kill them all. This terrified the Spartan elite more than anything. The very foundation of their state, the belief that a few warriors could rule over a mass of slaves, was crumbling. The rebellion was finally crushed, but Sparta was forever scarred. The Cryptii returned, their blades once again hunting in the night. Yet something had changed. The Helots no longer trembled as easily. They had tasted freedom, and the memory of it burned in their hearts. The Spartan rulers knew it too. They became harsher, more paranoid, more desperate to control their slaves. They doubled down on the Cryptii, making it even more brutal, even more secretive. Every year, when the first declared war on the Helots, the young men chosen for the Cryptii went out again into the fields. Again they killed. Again they tried to remind the Helots of their place. But rebellion had already left its mark. To outsiders, Sparta seemed strong. Its hoplites still marched in perfect formation, still crushed enemies in open battle, still terrified Athens and Persia alike. But inside, Sparta was rotting. Its warrior class was shrinking. Its fear of Helot rebellion consumed it. The Cryptii was no longer just a test for young Spartans. It was a necessity for survival. Without it, the Helots would rise again. Without it, the Spartan system would collapse. But here's the paradox. The more the Cryptii killed, the more hatred it created. The more hatred it created, the more rebellions brewed. Sparta was trapped in a cycle of violence it could never escape. And yet, there was something even darker. Some historians believe the Cryptiae was not only about controlling helots. It was also about shaping the Spartan psyche. Think of it. A young man, maybe 16 or 17 years old, sent into the night with nothing but a dagger. Ordered to kill a fellow human being not in battle, but in cold blood. What did that do to him? It stripped away empathy. It taught him that cruelty was not only allowed, it was necessary. It was the state itself commanding him to kill. By the time he returned, he was no longer just a boy. He was a weapon. This was the hidden side of Sparta's strength. Its warriors were not only trained in discipline and courage, they were trained in mercilessness. The Cryptiae carved it into their souls. But such men, molded in shadows, carried darkness within them. They could march in ranks, chant in unison, fight with precision. But deep inside, the Cryptiae had planted something, a coldness that could never truly be erased. The Helots knew this. The Spartans knew it too. And perhaps, in some twisted way, the Cryptiae did not just rule the Helots. It ruled Sparta itself. Because once you build a society on fear, can you ever live without it? The Cryptiae was a secret order, but secrets always have cracks. Whispers spread. Foreigners wrote about it. Some admired Sparta's discipline but recoiled at its cruelty. Others claimed the Cryptiae was proof that Sparta was not noble, but savage. Still, the Brotherhood endured for centuries. It remained the hidden blade in the shadows, the silent enforcer of Sparta's empire of fear. But what happened when Sparta itself began to fall? When the great warrior state, undefeated for centuries, finally faced its downfall? Would the Cryptiae protect it? Or would the Brotherhood vanish into the shadows, forgotten by history? The answer lies not in Sparta's rise, but in its fall. The night blades of the Cryptiae haunted Sparta for centuries. As long as the state stood strong, their shadows stretched far, cutting down helot whispers before they grew into shouts. But no empire, no city, no brotherhood lasts forever. Even the sharpest dagger grows dull with time. And Sparta was no exception. The turning point came in 371 BC, at the Battle of Leuctra. For the first time in generations, the Spartan army, feared across Greece, was crushed in open battle. The Thebans, led by Epaminondas, broke the Spartan phalanx. Spartan warriors fell, and with them, the myth of Spartan invincibility shattered. Back in Sparta, the Helots watched closely. They saw cracks forming in their master's armor. The terror of the Cryptiae still lingered, but now it was mixed with something else: hope. If Sparta could be beaten, then maybe the Helots could one day be free. The defeat at Leuctra sent shockwaves through the Spartan system. Sparta's warrior class, already dwindling, began to collapse. To be a Spartiate, a full citizen, required wealth, land, and slaves. But as numbers shrank, so did control. Fewer masters meant fewer enforcers. And fewer enforcers meant more risk of rebellion. The Cryptiae, once a hidden strength, became a desperate lifeline. Spartan rulers leaned even harder on their brotherhood of killers. Every year, young men still crept into the fields. Every year, Helots still bled in the night. But the more the Cryptiae killed, the more it revealed Sparta's weakness. A strong state does not need such terror. A strong state wins loyalty through pride or prosperity. Sparta, clinging to survival, had nothing left but fear. And fear alone cannot hold a nation forever. In 369 BC, just 2 years after Leuctra, the Thebans struck again. This time, they marched deep into the Peloponnese. At their side were allies, and Helots eager to turn against their masters. The Thebans did the unthinkable. They freed the people of Messenia, the largest population of Helots under Spartan rule. The newly freed Messenians built a city of their own, Messene, fortified and strong. No longer slaves, they stood as a permanent wound to Spartan pride. Sparta had lost not just land, but its very foundation. Without Helots, there was no food. Without Helots, there was no state. And what of the Cryptiae then? Its blades were useless. You cannot stalk in the night when your prey has already escaped. The Brotherhood that once struck terror into thousands now found itself powerless. Its purpose crumbled, its shadow faded. By the time Sparta limped into the Hellenistic age, it was a shadow of its former self. Other cities, Macedon, Thebes, Athens, rose and fell, while Sparta clung to memories of its glory. The Cryptiae may have survived in whispers, but it no longer ruled. It had become a ghost, a ritual remembered only in fragments. Foreign writers like Plutarch spoke of it centuries later, describing it as both brutal and strange. Some admired its discipline, others condemned its cruelty, but even they struggled to know the full truth. The Cryptiae was meant to be hidden, after all. Its secrets died with the men who once carried daggers into the dark. And yet, the legacy of the Cryptiae lingers. It is the story of power built on fear. The story of how a ruling class maintained control not through numbers, not through wealth, not even through laws, but through terror in the night. But it is also a warning. Fear can build an empire, but it cannot keep it standing forever. The Cryptiae taught young Spartans to kill, to shed mercy, to see violence as a duty. And in doing so, it hollowed out Sparta itself. By making cruelty a necessity, Sparta chained itself to the same darkness it unleashed on others. The Helots may have been slaves, but in a way, so were the Spartans, slaves to the system they created, slaves to the brotherhood that defined them. Today, the Cryptiae still fascinates historians. Some compare it to secret police. Others see it as a rite of passage. But perhaps the most haunting truth is this: it was both. It was a ritual, yes, but also a weapon of state terror. And like all weapons, it cut both ways. The Helots endured generations of fear, yet they never forgot rebellion. The Spartans forged generations of killers, yet they could not escape decline. In the end, the Cryptiae did not save Sparta. It only delayed its fall. Because when a nation's strength rests not on justice, but on shadows, it can never stand in the light. The Dark Brotherhood of Sparta. A name whispered, a dagger unseen. Its secrets buried in the silence of history. But its lesson remains. The sharper the fear, the faster it cuts the hand that wields it.